Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Kuf Yud Chet. We are on the top wide line of Kuf Yud Chet Amud Aleph. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. Yesterday, we began the ninth chapter of Chullin, which addresses the ability of food to convey tuma, whether by touching or being from a non-slaughtered animal, i.e. a nevela. So the opening Mishnah introduced us to two concepts. Not directly, it didn't mention them directly, but these are the two key concepts. A yad, something non-edible attached to food that allows one to hold on to the food. So, for example, a stem of a fruit, or another example is a bone, like a chicken leg bone that has meat on it. So that is a yad. Doesn't necessarily protect the food, but it allows you to hold on to the food. A shomer is a protector. It's something non-edible that's attached to the food that protects the food. For example, a shell. But it doesn't have to be a shell. We will see later today the non-stem side of the pomegranate also ensures that the pomegranate's insides are not open to the elements. And so as a result, it also is considered a shomer. Similarly, when it comes to marrow, the bone around the marrow is considered a shomer. So those are just a couple of examples. Now, why do we care about whether something's a yad or a shomer? Well, both a yad and a shomer will convey tuma to the food. So if something is tameh, touches the yad or the shomer, the food itself also becomes tameh. This is relevant, for example, if the food is truma, or if it's when it comes to meat, if it's kodshim, so then that would be a very relevant fact. And so even though they are not food, and even though the food itself was not touched, they will convey the tuma to the food to which they are attached. Now, the shomer and the yad differ in that a shomer actually counts towards the size, the egg size amount of food necessary to convey tuma, while a yad does not. So, for example, let's say you have a very small amount of meat left on a chicken leg bone, and now that piece of meat, along with the chicken leg that's attached to it, constitutes more than an egg size. So maybe it's a duck or a turkey leg. So it's a really big bone that's associated with it. So it's more than an egg, but the amount of meat on that bone is less than an egg. So then, even though you really need an egg size amount of food for the food to convey tuma to something else, if the shomer and obviously my leg was a yad example, so I should have said a bone with marrow inside. So the bone with marrow inside, even if the marrow is only a little bit, but the bone is very thick, so as a result, it's an egg size amount that will convey tuma to other things. Now, a yad does not count. And so in the exact same example, my apologies for getting it flipped in the first time, when you have the leg that's attached to a little bit of meat, even though it might have the same amount that you have of meat is the same amount of marrow that you had, but now instead of being a shomer, the bone that was protecting the marrow, you only have a yad, the leg that was holding the meat. Well, now that leg slash meat will not convey tuma because you do not have an egg size amount of the food. And the yad does not count towards it. And so while the bone would count towards to the egg size amount of marrow plus bone because it's a shomer, the leg will not. So even a shomer, now all of that is true with respect to ordinary food tuma. Now, when it comes to the olive size of nevela that you need in order for something to be considered a nevela that is capable of making something else tameh, even a shomer doesn't count. And that's actually how we ended the day yesterday. We went through a brisa that taught that specific lesson. And now with this background, let's pick up on the first wide line of Kuf Yud Chet Amud Aleph Tanan Hasam. So, Tanan Hasam, we learned in a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah, first Mishnah in Uktzin. So Kol Shehu Yad below Shomer, anything that is a handle but not a protector. Tame, it can make the food tame, umitame, and it can convey tuma to other things. Ve'eno mitztarif, but it does not combine with the food to constitute an egg-sized volume to convey tuma elsewhere. So shomer, when it comes to a shomer, something that's protecting, the afal pi she'eno yad, even if it is not also a yad, tamei umitamei, it can convey, it can receive tuma, it can contract tuma for the food itself, and it can convey tuma to other things. So even if you don't touch the food itself, you touch just the shomer, that will still be sufficient to convey the tuma to the other thing. Umitzaref, and it will add to the amount of food to ensure that you have an egg-sized volume of food so that it can convey tuma in aggregate. So lo yad velo shomer. If you have something that's attached that is neither a yad nor a shomer, so for example, maybe we'll say the pit of a fruit, lo tame velo mitame. It does not acquire tuma. It cannot make the touching it does not make the tuma go to the rest of the food. It transmit, and it also will not cause if something touches it and the food is tame, it will not convey the tuma to something else. Yado. So now the Gemara, having cited this brisa, the Gemara now wants to understand what's the basis for this. So yados heichi ksiva. Where in the world does the Torah say anything about yados? And the answer is it does not. But we are going to learn a drasha that suggests that actually yadot are included. Diksiv, because the Torah says, there's a pasuk by Yikra Perek Yud Aleph pasuk Lamed Chet, where it says in that pasuk, V'chiyutan mayim al zera v'nafal menivlasam alav tamei hu lachem. So when you put water on the seeds and some kind of nevela falls on it, then it will be tamei for you. And the for you is a very important aspect of this. So let's now take a look back into the Gemara. V'chiyutan mayim al zera v'nafal menivlasam alav tamehu lachem. Actually, I guess it actually quoted the entire pasuk, so I didn't need to look at the side in order to get the whole pasuk. Lachem. So the point is that it's for you. Lachol b'tzarchechem. Any way you need it. So the point is that anything that fulfills your need for the food is going to be included in food. L'rabos esayados. So that comes to tell you that you know what gets included in this zoreya, in this zera rather, of the seed, anything that's attached to it that is enabling you to use it. So that includes even l'rabos esayados. That includes handles. So Uksiv, and so that's pasuk number 1. So again, Lamed Chet is pasuk number 1. Lamed Chet is pasuk number 1, and now we have pasuk number 2. Uksiv, this is the next pasuk, Lamed, which is Vayikra Yud Aleph pasuk Lamed Tet, which says V'chiyamut. Well, we'll take a look in we're not going to quote the entire pasuk this time. V'chiyamut min habeima asher hilachem, and then the pasuk continues. Lo'achla hanogea benivlasam yitma ad ha'arev, telling us that the one who eats it is going to become tamei. And the point is, again, it says lachem, lachem. And again, and if one of the animals that is permitted to you shall die, so one who touches its carcass shall be tameh. And again, it says for you, lachem, so lakol b'shabatzarchechem, anything that you touch that is needed for the item. Larabos as a yados, that again comes to include handles. So yad lahachnis. So the first pasuk, which is talking about the item itself, the food item becoming tameh, that is lahachnis. That is to contract tuma to the food, and ulahotzi. And the second pasuk that we quoted is to convey tuma to others, as in that pasuk we're talking about one who touches the person who eats it then becomes tameh. So it's conveying tuma to others. So the bottom line is that we now have that a yad will contract tuma and convey tuma. So shomer lahachnis ulahotzi lo tzarakra. Now, how about the fact that a shomer also gets covered? Well, you don't need an explicit verse. Kal v'chomer miyad asi. It is a kal v'chomer from the case of a yad. Uma yad she'ena magina mechneses umotzia. If given that a yad does that which does not protect the item can contract tuma and convey tuma. So shomer lo kol shekain. Well, then a something that actually protects an item, which is a way better item, way better connection than something that just is allows you to hold the item. Well, then it certainly should. It certainly is more connected to the item, and therefore has a greater ability to contract tuma and a greater ability to convey tuma. So shomer, and now shomer de kasav rachmana lamali. Well, one second. What about the pasuk that we wrote in connection with shomer? Well, that is the pasuk Vayikra Perak Yud Aleph pasuk Lamed Zayin, and Rashi tells us shomer. If we take a look at Rashi, it's down from the top of the narrow lines in Rashi, 9, 12, 15, 18, about 20 lines down. Shomer to Kasav Rachmana La'el, as we saw earlier. This was the brisa that we saw at the very end of the day yesterday, at the very top of today's daf and the bottom of yesterday's daf. Me al kol zera zarua, that we learn it from the fact that it says on every on upon any seed of a seed plant. And so, that was the Gemara on 117b noted that implies a shomer is included. And so lamali, why do we have that? Rashi is continuing the words in the Gemara. So now we'll go back into the Gemara. Shomer de kasav rachmana lamali. So shma mina litzaref, right? So back into the Gemara. We're now one, two, sorry, I lost the place. So it's the shin mem is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down in the wide lines of the Gemara. So shma mina litzaref, it comes to teach us that it comes to combine. So the point is we didn't need to have this because we had a kal v'chomer, and so as a result, that's how we know that a shomer not only can contract tuma and convey tuma. We learned that from a kal v'chomer, giving that a yad can do that. But we also, since the pasuk also references it, therefore we're going to also say that it can even combine with the food to constitute enough food to become tameh. Ve'ema yad lahachnis v'lo lahotzi. Well, now we're going to spend much of the rest of today trying to undermine the lesson that we just learned. And so maybe we could say that a yad has the ability to contract tuma to the food, but maybe it does not have the ability to convey tuma. And shomer lahachnis ulahotzi. And what the pasuk is adding by referencing the fact that by also having a pasuk for shomer, namely Vayikra Perak Yud Aleph pasuk Lamed Zayin, that is teaching us that in fact it not only that a shomer can do both. So the point is maybe our assumption that the yad can do both is incorrect, and really all the yad can do is contract tuma and not convey tuma. Aval yad lahotzi v'shomer l'tzorif lo, but the yad cannot convey tuma, and the shomer does not have the ability to combine with the food to constitute the necessary size. So maybe that's the way we should read these psukim. No, yad lahachnis v'lo lahotzi lo matzah summers. You can't possibly say that something can only contract tuma and not convey tuma, because hashta ayule ma'ayla apuki mibai. If something can bring tuma to the food, it can certainly cause tuma to leave the food. And so as a result, that can't be. You would be able to essentially learn, if we knew that it could, that something could contract, you would know that it can also convey. So, all right, so let's reverse it.
But Rabbi, there are a lot of examples of something that will cause something to be, if not tamei, then puzzle, but the puzzle thing cannot go in the other direction.
That, but the key is not very important is the medium. What here is matters is the medium, not the underlying item itself. So you are right. So for example, right, something that's a sheni latuma, if something else is not capable of being a shlishi latuma, it won't become a shlishi latuma. But
Right.
this is not about the underlying status. This is about the medium. And so the point is that if the yad is something that enables tuma of the right level to go to the food, well, then the yad would also be sufficient to allow tuma of the right level to leave the food, because it is harder for something to become tameh than to convey tuma. And so it is, you make a great point, and it's important to highlight that we're not talking about the fundamental level of tuma. We're assuming that the fundamental level of tuma is one that can convey or contract. And so the point is that we're talking about the medium, the method through which the item is becoming tameh. And so that is what this is trying to say. And so that's that is why the fact that sometimes you'll have a category of tuma, like a sheni latuma, that can't make a shlishi latuma, or a shlishi that can't make a revi, whatever it is, at some point it ends, right? The point is that we're not talking about the lowering of levels. We're talking about a situation where assuming a sufficiently high level of tuma, can it pass the tuma through this medium? And the answer is anything that allows any medium that allows an item to become tameh would also be a medium, would certainly be a medium that would allow that item to convey tuma when the tuma is sufficiently strong. So again, ve'ema yad lahotzi v'lo lahaktas. And so we reverse it and say, okay, so fine. Maybe the point is that you can have something that is strong enough to convey tuma, but not strong enough to contract tuma, so that it will not cause the food to become tameh, but it will convey any tuma of the food to something else. So maybe that's what a yad can do. And a shomer, so ve'ema yad lahotzi v'lo lahachnis, maybe a yad can convey it to elsewhere, but not actually contract tuma for the food. And a shomer lahotzi ulahachnis, and a shomer can do both. So aval yad lahachnis, but when it comes to a yad contracting tuma, the shomer letzaref, and a shomer combining to constitute the egg size volume, maybe that doesn't work. So again, we're going to reject. So that's the updated question, and now we're going to say, no, that doesn't work either. So yad yasei riksiv, the Torah has an extra yad, because we've now referenced three different things. We have a yad in connection with the zera, the seed. We have a yad that's in connection with nevela. We have a shomer that's in connection with seed. And now we're adding a fourth pasuk. This is Vayikra Parak Yud Aleph pasuk Lamed Hey, where it says the tanur v'kirayim yutatz, that you have to break them down. And why do you have to break them down? Well, the pasuk says because they were tameim haim utmeim yuyu lachem. Again, we have the word lachem at the end of that verse. And so the entire verse is v'chol asher yipol menivlasam alav. Any kind of time you have a nevela fall on these items, yitmat tanur, the oven will become tamei, v'chirayim, or the stove, yutats, and so you have to break it down. Tmeim haim, because they are tame, utmeim yu lachem, and they will be tame for you. So again, lachem l'rabos es hayados, to say that if you have an oven with a handle or a stove with a handle, it also will become tame, even if the tame item touches only the handle. So hey minayhu mayater. So okay, so you've now shown that we have three references to yad. Yad with respect to seed, yad with respect to nevela, and yad with respect to ovens. So which one are you telling me is extra? And now we will go through all the three different possibilities. Then we will say, well, maybe we can't do it from one, but maybe we could do it from two. And so we will go through the three possibilities of learning from two. We will end up rejecting all of these. So let's be patient and we will go through it together. So, hey minayo miyater, which one of the three is extra? Again, we have oven, seed, and nevela. Lichtav rachmana bizroyim v'leisu hanach. So let's just skip the seeds and we'll learn it from the other two, ovens and nevela. So malaz roim, well, you can't do that. Malaz roim shekain tumasan meruba, but you have there's something special about seeds because they have a greater ability to convey tuma than other things. Let's take a look at this Rashi, second of the wide lines in Rashi. Zraim tuma meruba, shemekablim tuma, mivlade tuma. They have the ability to accept tuma from a non-av hatuma, from a rishon latuma, because food has the ability to become a sheni latuma. Tomar betanur, but when it comes to an oven, she'enu makabel tuma elame av hatuma, it can only become a rishon latuma. It cannot become a sheni latuma. V'chein minavela. And also when it comes to an avela, meruba tumas ochlin, as we saw in our Mishnah, there is an aspect of tumas ochlin that is greater than nevela. Kedetan masnizin, as we saw in our Mishnah, ribulatame tumas ochlin. There are extra positive, extra aspects in connection with tumas ochlin, mimasha ribulatame tumas nevelos, from the fact that from what we had with respect to tuma of nevela, and so as a result, the seeds. You can't learn from the seeds to oven and nevela because they have a component that does not exist by both ovens and nevela. So now let's try. So let's try the next one. Lichtav rachmana betanor v'leisi hanach minei. So let's have the Torah write let's 1 second. So I'm sorry. I was not saying that it should have omitted seeds. It should have just written about seeds. And so now we're going to say, so let the Torah just write about ovens, right? Again, given the fact that seeds have the greater ability to become contaminated and to and greater ability than nevela, as noted in our Mishnah, we're not going to learn from seeds to nevela and ovens. So nevela and ovens are not extra. And so as a result, the Gemara says, okay, so let's say that we will just learn from ovens to the other cases. And we'll say, oh, well, if ovens can become have a yad that's tameh, certainly seeds, which have an aspect that they can become a sheni latuma, certainly they will be able to. So no, we can't learn from ovens either because malataner shekain matame me'aviro. tanur has a strength that other items don't have because it conveys tuma even to things that are in the airspace that never touch the oven. So as a result, you can't learn from ovens to other things because maybe it's only things that have the ability to convey tuma through the air. So lichtav Rahmana bin Nevela.
such as an earthenware container.
Correct, such as an earthenware container, exactly, which is exactly what an oven is. That's their oven is an earthenware container. So lichtov rachmana bin nevela v'leisi hanach mina. So 1 second. So let's fine. So we'll omit nevela. So we'll just teach nevela, and we'll learn the other things from it. No, again, you even though it is true that oven has something that's stricter than nevela because it conveys tuma through the air, and the seeds have something stricter than nevela because they can become a sheni tuma. But mal nevela shekain mitama adam. A nevela has something stricter because the nevela of those three items is the only one that can convey tuma to a human. So now umitame b'masa, and if you are carrying it, even if you do not touch it, you will become tameh. And so that is true only for a nevela and not for either the seeds nor the oven. And so utuma yotza megufa. And moreover, there's a third aspect of the nevela that is strictest because it's tameh itself, meaning it doesn't need to touch anything else to become tameh. And so as a result, you cannot learn from nevela to other things. So okay, so chada michada lo asa, you're absolutely right. We can't learn from one item to any of the others, but tesi chada mitarti. But maybe we can learn two from one. I mean, learn one from two. So hi Tasi. All right. So which two are we going to learn from? So lo luktav rakmana bizraim b'tesi mihana. So all right. So maybe we should not write about seeds, and we can learn from the other two, namely nevela and ovens. Well, malahana shekain mitamin shalo behekshar. But what's second, when it comes to the ovens and nevela, they can become tameh without any special advanced preparation. But food, like seeds, they need to have been touched by one of the seven liquids. And so as a result, if it's not touched by one of the seven liquids after it's detached from the ground, well, then it will not become capable of becoming tameh. So tomer bizroim she'em tamen el behechsher. So can you say can you learn from those two items to something that only can acquire tuma because of advanced preparation? Isn't that a good upslug of this effort? No, it's not a good upslug because Amar Rav Huna, Breder Rav Yoshua, Rav Yehuna points out Perush Shalo Huksharu Kitaner Shalo Nigmara Malakto Dami. No, why is it that foods need to have some kind of preparation in order to be capable of become tameh? Because that is how they become a finished item. And so as a result, similarly, a tanur that is not yet finished, it's not yet a vessel. It does not have the ability to become tameh. And so that is very similar. And so as a result, you cannot use the fact of hechsher because in fact, tanur would be yochiach. Tanur would prove the case for you. And so even though you might have a valid point with respect to nevela, but we would point out that when it comes to an oven, you do also need to have some kind of hechsher. You need to complete the oven in order for it to become tameh. So maybe you should be able to learn from ovens and nevela to the case of seeds. Ela parachachi. So actually, the question that we need to ask is a different one. And it's the following. Malahanach shekain metamin shelo b'negia. Well, both nevela and ovens enable tuma to be conveyed without contact. Because when it comes to the oven, the airspace will make something tameh even without touching it. And when it comes to the nevela, you can carry it without touching it and become tameh. Tomer bizraim she'em metamin el b'negia. But those are stringencies that don't apply to seeds. There is no way for a seed to become tameh other than and actually, I guess the nevela itself is tameh. So it's not even just it becomes tame with by its very nature. And so, of course, that is different from seeds. Seeds only can become tame by touching something. So as a result, that it can't be that we're gonna learn from oven and nevela. And so now we try one of the other possibilities. There are two more possibilities to go through. So lo lifta rachmana b'tanur. So don't write about ovens, b'tesim mihanach, and learn from the other two, nevela and seeds. So malahanach shekain. You can't do that. Malahanach shekain ochel. Nevela and seeds are both food, and oven is not. So maybe it's only with respect to food that yados are a relevant thing. And when it comes to non-food, yados would not be relevant. So we can't not write ovens. So lo lichta rachmana b'nevela b'tesi mehanach. So finally, our third and final possibility is don't write in connection with nevela, and we'll learn from the other two. And you know what? We could. Maybe we could, at least. Yad dinevela lamali. And so, as a result, why would we have the yad in connection with a nevela? So, the yad within connection with nevela, im eino inyan, liyad nevela, teneu inyan, liyad alma. So, if you don't say, given the fact that we have this yad nevela that is extra, so now we can say that it's a yad more generally. And so, as a result, now we can answer our original question, right? Our original question is maybe a yad only conveys tuma and does not contract tuma. And so now we say, well, given the Torah didn't need to write yad by nevela, but it did write yad by nevela, we can now say, my apologies for not scrolling. And so now we can say that in fact the yad by nevela is teaching us that in fact not only does a yad convey tuma, but it also contracts tuma. So yad lahachnis. So as a result, now we can say that yad comes to contract tuma, yad lahotzi. A yad can also convey tuma. And now that we have both of those lessons with respect to yad, we can learn a shomer from a kal v'chomer. And now the fact that the Torah also references shomer, we can now say shomer l'tzaref. So now the shomer is coming to tell us the fact that the Torah tells us about a shomer, even though it didn't need to. And that's in connection with the seeds by saying a seed within a seed. That's the pasuk that we quoted earlier. Let me get the pasuk for us. The pasuk is v'chi yipol min nivlasam al kol zera zerua asher yizareya, right? So it's a reference to a seed, the planting of a seed-based plant. And so the idea is that the seed has some kind of shell around it. And so as a result, that's a protector. And so that's the pasuk that references protection. And so as a result, why do we have to reference that level of protection, the emphasis of the on the seed? It is in order to tell us that a shomer has the ability to add to the food item itself. That now, if the food item is not an egg in volume, but with the shomer it is an egg in volume, it can still convey tuma elsewhere. So now the Gemara is going to challenge that effort and say maybe it still isn't good enough. And so va'akati yad nevela itzrich. Well, in second, maybe we need to still teach the yad of nevela, because the ilo kasav rachmana b'nevela. Because if we did not have a yad reference in connection with nevela, hava amina, I might have thought dayo levamin hadin liyot kanidon. Well, we would be learning nevela, as we just saw, from seeds in oven. Well, when you learn something from something else, you cannot learn anything extra, meaning any of the limitations that exist by the original item would also need to exist for the final item. So what would we say? Mahanach lo mitame adam. When it comes to the yadot of ovens and seeds, they don't have, in fact, they themselves don't have the ability to convey tuma to a person. So of course their yadot don't have the ability to convey tuma to a person. So maybe we should say af nevela lo matama adam. That also, when it comes to the yad, because we're learning yad of nevela from the yad of ovens and seeds, maybe we would say that an oven of a nevela also does not have the ability to cause a person to become tameh. And that's not true. And so as a result, we have to say Ela Yad Nevela Mitzrach Tzarach. And so as a result, all of our efforts so far have fallen apart because in fact we have to say that the yad written by Nevela is also a necessary pasuk. V'shomer de Nevela hu delot tzarach. Okay, so maybe we should say that it's the shomer of Nevela that isn't necessary. And that was the pasuk that we saw at the very top of this daf, where it was um, that is the pasuk. This is Vayikra Perek Yud Aleph pasuk Lamed Tet, where it says V'chi yamut min habehima asher hilachem lo'achla hanogea benivla sa yitma ad ha'arib. And we saw the Brisa say nivla sa teaches is referring to the that you have to touch the item itself and not the and not the hide. But if there's if the hide has an olive's volume of meat attached to it, then the fact that the pasuk says yitma says that it actually the person will become tameh. So we see from there that a shomer is able, because the skin of an animal is a shomer for the meat of the animal, and so we see that a shomer is able to convey tuma, and so lamai hilchasa kasvei rachmana. So why was it necessary to tell you about a shomer? Because after all, we could learn it from a kal v'chomer. So ila itzdarufe amrat lo mitzdaref. But 1 second, if you're going to tell me that the point of writing it is to tell you that the skin of a nevela can be added to it, we said in that brisa that it cannot be added, meaning the brisa itself specifically noted the law that we began with as part of the introduction today, that when it comes to nevela, the even not only does a yad not constitute part of the necessary volume, but even a shomer will not constitute part of the necessary volume. And that was the teaching of that brisa. So you cannot tell me that the shomer, the unnecessary reference to shomer, is telling us to combine the shomer with nevela for tuma. So amrat, right? So because amrat lo mitzdaref, you told me that it does not. So ula hotzi, and if you want to tell me that it's to tell us about the ability to convey tuma, kal v'chomer miyadasi, we would know that it can convey tuma because we can learn it from a kal v'chomer from yad. Ella im ein inyan l'shomer de nevela. So Taneu Inyan Liyad Nevela. So since it's not able to tell you anything about a shomer, let's have it tell us something about a yad. Vim Eno Inyan Liyad Nevela. And of course, it doesn't teach us anything about a yad Nevela because that law we already had elsewhere. So Taneu Inyan Liyad de Alma. So fine. So have it teach us the law of yad generally. And now we have the extra pasuk that we've been looking for all along. And so now this yad will tell us that not only can a yad convey tuma, but a yad can contract tuma for the meat itself, for the item to which it is attached. So yad, and so as a result, we have yad lahotzi. That's the first reference to yad. It allows us to know that it conveys tuma. Yad lahachnis, from the fact that we reference a shomer by nevela, which doesn't teach us anything about nevela or shomer, so we'll use it to teach us something about yad. That's what tells us that a yad has the ability to contract. And now we can say that the shomer reference in the pasuk that we have in connection with the seeds is telling us that a shomer even combines with the food in order to get the necessary volume. And so now we turn to Kuf Yud Chet and we try to challenge that effort as well. So the ema im eno inyan l'shomer de nevela. So one second, maybe we could say that if rather than say right, so that we the extra pasuk that we now have is the shomer by nevela, and what we said is don't use it by shomer nevela. In the end, use it for a yad by a non nevela. So, but one second, we could have given a different conclusion. Im eno inyan l'shomer nevelo, tenea inyan l'shomer da'alma. Say that maybe that the shomer is doing the following: shomer lahachnis, v'shomer l'tzaref. Instead of saying that, well, we have three verses. We have yad of a seed that tells us that something can convey tuma. We have and we need the yad of an oven and the yad of a nevela in order to tell us that in those situations also it can convey tuma. And we have a shomer of a seed that tells us that there's one level beyond which the seed, a shomer has the ability. So what we were originally doing was saying, well, the extra, and we have an extra shomer. So we were originally saying, use the extra shomer to tell you about yad, and then learn from a kal v'chomer from yad to shomer, and now use the shomer to tell you that it can even be an addition to the amount of food. It can combine with the amount of food. But maybe limit our lessons about yad to conveying tuma. And the one extra shomer is telling you about also about contracting tuma, and say that teneo inyan l'shomer da'alma shomer lahachnis v'shomer l'tzarif. Say that we have two psukim by shomer, one to tell you that it can contract, and one to tell you that it can combine. But aval yad lahachnis lo. But maybe a yad has no ability to contract tuma for the item itself. So we now go back all the way to the beginning. Elami ikara ki ksiva yad ahach nasa ksiva. So the answer is you have to go back and read the pasuk. Read the original pasuk. And so as a result, the original pasuk is the following. The original pasuk says that it's talking about hachnasa. It's talking about conveying tuma to the food. And so you can never say that the original yad is about conveying tuma, because the original yad reference is talking about contracting tuma to the food. And so as a result, our original question is rejected. And so as a result, we have a good answer. So, but now that you're telling me that in fact, we don't need an extra verse to tell us about the fact that a yad has the ability to both contract and convey. That once you tell me about a yad, the pasuk tells us that it can contract tuma, and the reference to it tells us that it can convey tuma. So now, why do we need el shomer de nevela lamali? Why do I need to reference the shomer that we just mentioned above? Why do we need to have that benivla sa pasuk? So lugufei, maybe it's teaching for itself. Ulamai, so what is it teaching for itself? Ila, it's derufe. If you're telling me that a shomer of a nevela can combine with the nevela to constitute the kazayas necessary to convey tuma. No, amrat lo mitzdarif. You already told me in that brisa at the end of the day yesterday, the very top of Kuf Yud Chet Amud Aleph, that a shomer does not combine with the meat in order to constitute the necessary volume. So ila hachnis ulahotzi. And if you're telling me about import, the ability to contract tuma or convey tuma, kal v'chomer miyad asya. We already learned that from a kal v'chomer. So milsa de asya. So what's the point? Why is it necessary? So the Gemara finally answers that when it comes to the reference of a shomer of a nevela, milsa de asya b'kal v'chomer, taraf v'kasav lakra. Sometimes the Torah, even though it could have learned something from a kal v'chomer, it will learn it from a pasuk explicitly. It will teach it from a pasuk explicitly. Well, ihachi shomer da'alma emalach lahachnis. Well, one second. If you're going to tell me that sometimes a shomer, a pasuk will tell us something that we could have learned from a kal v'chomer. Well, now, what did we learn from a kal v'chomer from shomer? We also learned its ability to contract tuma from a kal v'chomer. So maybe umilsa de asi b'kal v'chomer taraf v'kasavla. Maybe when we reference a shomer by the shomer in connection with seeds, maybe the shomer in connection with seeds is only telling us about contracting tuma, and we learn a kal v'chomer about conveying tuma from yad, and so as a result, maybe a shomer does not have the ability to add to the volume of the underlying substance. And so as a result, maybe we should say that. So the Gemara answers no. Heicha deika lamidrash darshinan. The only time that we will say that in fact sometimes the Torah will teach something that we could have learned with a kal v'chomer is if we don't have another drasha. But here we have another drasha. We're going to learn from the shomer, through a kal v'chomer, the fact that a shomer will both convey tuma and contract tuma, and now we can use the extra pasuk to say that it's mitztaref. And so as a result, but when it comes to the shomer of a nevela, we can't use it for a mitztaref. We don't have any other lessons that we need to learn, and so as a result, that's why in that situation we will just say that it is extra. Okay. All right. So now that we've answered that, we are actually going to now go back and say another answer to our question. So we had Rav Chaviva. Let me find where have I skipped down. 1 second. So now we've now gone through, we've answered, created a second answer to our original question, and we have an extra pasuk. I'm sorry, it's not based on an extra pasuk, but rather it's based on the fact that the yad pasuk in the Torah is talking about contracting tuma. So as a result, the reference to yad is teaching us about conveying tuma. We learn all of that through a kal v'chomer to shomer, and now the pasuk by shomer is teaching us about combining with the underlying volume. And so a shomer combines, a yad only contracts and conveys. So now that we have that as one possible answer, Rav Chaviva goes and says, you know what? I'm going to give you a different answer to a question that you asked earlier. That actually we can say that there's an extra pasuk that is teaching us about contracting and conveying. And actually, the question that Rav Chaviva is going to answer is the following. We said earlier, how do you know that the extra pasuk of Shomer by Nevela is going to go all the way and tell us about Yad? Maybe it should tell us about Shomer generally. And so as a result, Rav Chaviva says the following: Shiny Shomer Nevela. The case of a Shomer of a Nevela is different. Kaven de Meiser Yad Ka'avid. Well, to Meiser Yad Ka'avid, because a Shomer is only functioning effectively as a Yad in connection with Tuma and Ayad Shadinan Lay. So because in connection with a nevela, we said again at the brisa that we learned at the end of the day yesterday at the top of Kuf Yud Chet Amud Aleph, we said that brisa taught us that a shomer does not combine for the necessary volume with the nevela. And so as a result, the shomer of a nevela is effectively equal to a yad, because a shomer of a nevela can contract and convey, but not combine. And similarly, a yad contracts and conveys, but does not combine. And so that's why we are not going to choose to learn from a shomer of a nevela to shomer generally, but rather we should learn from a shomer of nevela to a yad generally. And so that's why we will choose to use it, to assign it to a yad generally rather than a shomer generally. And so that gives us a second alternative. So we end up with two approaches that teach us the concept of yad conveys and contracts where and does not combine, whereas a shomer conveys, contracts, and combines. We have one lesson that is based on the content of the verse being about contracting tuma. Then the reference to yad tells us about conveying tuma, and the extra pasuk about shomer tells us that it also combines, unlike a yad, which does not, which only contracts and conveys. That's lesson number one. Lesson number two, based on Rav Chaviva, is the fact that actually we have an extra pasuk with respect to yad. What the first pasuk with respect to yad tells us about conveying tuma because that's the easiest item. Then the extra pasuk tells us about contracting tuma, and then and that extra pasuk is the extra pasuk of a shomer by nevela, and we learn the shomer by nevela, which we didn't need. We're going to take that shomer by nevela and use it by a yad generally, because a shomer by nevela is just like a yad, and so we'll use it by yad generally to tell us that yad contracts and conveys. Now we have the kal v'chomer to tell us the shomer does the same. We have an extra pasuk by shomer to tell us that a shomer combines. And that is the summary of what we have seen over the course of today. All right, so having explained that a shomer, a shell is the shomer for seeds, the Gemara raises other foods to try to understand the scope of what a shomer should be. So Maskif Lo Rav Yehuda Bar Yishmael, we have this lesson that when it comes to seeds, that's called a shomer. But hapitma shel rimon mitztarefes, we have that the pitum of a pomegranate combines with the pomegranate to constitute the necessary size. V'nates shelo ein mitztaref, but the nates, let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi says hapitma shel rimon. It's from the bottom of the narrow lines of Rashi. 12 lines up on Kuf Yud Chet Amabet. Hapitma shel rimon hu shomer al piv. It covers the opening of the pomegranate. V'hanates, and what does the nates do? Shomer acher. It protects the pitom itself. It does not protect the underlying item. So al gav hapitma, it's another protection on the pitom itself. Kamoshi yesh al agozim shomer al gabi shomer. Sometimes you'll have on nuts, you'll have multiple layers of coverage, and so as a result, the shomer on top is not going to combine with the food, whereas the shomer underneath will combine. So ein mitztarif, we say that the nates does not combine, and we'll just do the beginning of the next Rashi to ein shomer al gabi shomer, because it is a shomer that is on top of another shomer does not mitztaref. Back into the Gemara. V'amai, why is it that that's the case? And actually keep your finger on the Rashi, because we're going to jump back into the middle of that Rashi, because Rashi often intersperses the words of the Gemara almost like he's helping you read the Gemara, and so we'll go back into it to cover that. V'amai kari kan al kol zera zarua. Well, 1 second. Veleka, you said that it needs to be like a seed. Well, these things are not planted. If we take a look at Rashi, it's the first word on the seventh to last narrow line. V'amai haleka l'meimar kederach shebnei adam motzian lizriya. Unlike in other situations where you take out something to plant, halav zrayim ninhu. This pomegranate isn't a seed. V'kishenotin ilan einotin ela yichor. When you plant a tree, you plant a shoot. V'im notin rimon. And if you were to plant the pomegranate itself, kvar nishra otapidma, you would plant it after the pitom has been removed. Shehi ke'ein perach shebarosha tapuchim. It's like a flower on the top of an apple. And now again, keep your finger right there in the Rashi. We're a second to last narrow line in Rashi, and back into the Gemara. Usu, and moreover, back into the Gemara. Haditanan haor v'harote v'hakipa mitztaref l'tamik tumas ochlin. So that's an excerpt from our Gemara, from our Mishnah at the beginning of the parak. But most importantly here, the hide is counting. towards the food. So minalan, again, the hide is not something that gets planted. It's not like a seed. So what's the basis? So back into the Gemara, back into the Rashi rather, second to last line, middle of the line. Umasnisin nami diktani or mitzdarif, when we said that the hide it get combined, mishum shomer, it's because it is a protector. Ha lo ksiv shomer, ela bizroim. But based on what you've taught in that original brisa and that we learned at the end of the day yesterday, the only time that you have something that's called a shomer is when you're planting seeds. It seems like the understanding is that it's specifically got to be something that you plant. Ella tlasa kraiksiva. But rather, so now the Gemara back into the Gemara, and the Gemara answers that really there are three seeds situation. That's what we're learning from. And so what are the three? I'll call Zera, Zerua, Asher Yizareya. So we have three references to seeds. And so as a result, Chad Lashomer Dizraim, the first one teaches us about the fact that you have to be the whatever is the protector of a seed is going to convey tuma. V'chad Lashomer Ilanos. A second is telling us about the trees, that anything that would be a protector in connection with fruit from trees, even if you don't plant it, would be capable of becoming tamei and would be combined for tuma. And idach l'shomer basar ubeitzim v'dagim. And the third is for not things that don't grow from the ground, meat and eggs and fish, etc. Those things they have protectors. So for example, the meat has the hide, the eggs have their shell, the fish have their scales. And so as a result, all of those will constitute a protector and need to be included in the underlying volume, if the item becomes tamei. And so you would use the shell of the egg, quite ironically, to determine whether you have an egg-sized volume of tuma in order to convey tuma of food. So that is, now we've clarified that. And so the Gemara now discusses the scope of the law of handles. So Amarav Chia Bar Ashi, Amarav, Yesh Yad Latuma, V'ein Yad Lahechsher. So according to Rav, there's a yad can convey tuma, right? For tuma, it can convey and contract. But when it comes to actually being an item that is washed, so as a result, whether it has the possibility to contract tuma, just water touching the yad of a food will not cause it to become capable of becoming tamei. Take a look at Rashi, third line down. V'ein yad laheksher, ein Torah's yad in the medium wide lines. Ein Torah's yad leinyan heksher. There's no rule of yad with respect to the preparation. She'im hukshara hayat. If the yad itself was the only thing that became touching water and therefore was prepared to become capable of becoming tamei, lo huksharu hazraim. The seed itself will not become capable of becoming tamei. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. Yesh yad latuma ula. He says no, it does. It absolutely does indicate. So, b'mai kamifliki, what are they arguing about? You could say that they're arguing about logic, or you can say that they're arguing about how to understand a pasuk. If you want to say that they're arguing about a pasuk, here's the pasuk. Mar savar mikra nidrash lefanav velo lifnei lefanav. Right. So the pasuk says, if water, this is a pasuk by Yikra Perak Yud Aleph pasuk lamed chet, that says if water had been placed upon a seed and then their carcass falls upon it, it is tamei for you. So we see that pasuk itself first references hechsher, then references the connection of the tamei item, the carcass, the nevela, on the item. And so now the food has become tamei. So we have both the hechsher and the tuma process. So Rav says, no, you just focus on the end of it, because it says we're learning from lachem, we're going to just learn about the last moment. The yad is the lachem, and so the carcass is going to be the last thing we talked about. And so when the carcass touches it, that's what the lachem teaches. A yad can convey tuma, but what came before, the fact that the water was on it, that has nothing to do with the lachem, and therefore we're going to say that the lachem does not teach us anything about that. Umar Savar and Rabbi Yochanan says no. Mikra nidrash lefanav v'lefnei nefanav. You can learn the entire pasuk from the language of for you. For you teaches us about a yad. The pasuk is about being haksher makabel tuma, being prepared to become capable of becoming tamei, and the process of becoming tamei. So a yad can do both, and so that's the basis of learning from the pasuk. Or you could say that it's based on reasoning and not a pasuk, and that's the following: Mar Savar Heksher Tchilas Tumahu. The one says that it's the beginning of Tameh. Umar Savar Heksher Lav Tchilas Tumahu, and the other one says no, it's not the beginning of the process. Rav says it's not the beginning of the process, and so as a result, that's the story, and so therefore a yad can't become capable, can't cause something to become capable of becoming Tameh, and the other one does. So Tanya Kavase to Rabbi Yochanan, we have a brisa that teaches like Rabbi Yochanan, Kashem sheyesh yad l'tuma kach yesh yad l'kaksher. That in fact you can have a yad for both. Kashem she'em mekam l'tuma elak l'kshiyat chashlo. And just as a plant can only become capable of becoming tamei when it's detached from the ground, kach ein mekam l'heksher ela ad shiyatalshu. So too, a yad is not only able of becoming a heksher l'kabel tuma when it touches the ground. So wishing everybody a great day. Sorry for not scrolling this last little bit. We'll pick up from there, God willing, tomorrow.